So as you already understood, I'm not going to speak about drugs. And maybe to refresh your minds that CVA clients or stroke clients have other things that we can assess and treat in order for them to get back to their everyday function. So first, I would like to acknowledge my colleagues and my students. I do it up front because it's not only me, it's really a lot of people that are involved in those two. It's actually two different projects that I'm going to present today. Okay, so the rationale for my presentation is that stroke is, we all know that it's a major cause of disability. And we try, and it was very interesting for me to hear that you are looking at motor, like the staircase. How can the mice go up the staircase or whatever? We tend to look at their motor problems, but motor are only part of what they have, and it's more pronounced. It's more, we see it, and the clients talk about it. When you ask them after their stroke, what's the main problem that you have? Most of the time they'll tell you it's hard for me to walk, it's hard for me to move my hand or whatever, and some of those motor problems they don't even know about. But as you know, cognitive problems are not very, they're not things that we can touch. They're not things that are seen, but they are sometimes the underlying mechanisms for everyday function. So just to give some statistics, executive functions are between 43 to 78% of stroke clients have executive function problems, and I'm going to define executive functions in a few minutes. And another evidence to show that 40% of a sample of 256 clients had executive functions problems, and I'm going to speak about how those executive functions problems were assessed, because I am criticizing it. Okay, so just to define executive functions, there are many definitions for executive functions, but I put those two because one is talking about the non-routine tasks, meaning that it's if you assess it in something that is automatic for the client, sometimes you won't even see a problem. Okay, if you ask him to do something that he does on his everyday basis, sometimes the executive functions problems will not be there. You won't find them. But in order to assess executive functions, you have to give a task that will be non-routine. Okay, that's one thing. Another thing is looking on the components of executive functions. So we're speaking about the sequence, the attention, the inhibition. I know that in drug you speak about inhibition in a different way, but maybe calling it avoiding, okay, being unable, the multitasking and the flexibility. Okay, so impairment of executive functions lead to difficulties in IADL, and that's evidence in many research already. So usually if you look at the literature and you come to departments and look how people are assessing executive functions, they are using neuropsychological tests like the Wisconsin sorting test, like the Stroop, many tests that are there for the last, I would say, 40, 50 years. But the problem with those tests is that they have very low, if at all, ecological validity, meaning that we cannot really predict out of what we see in those tests, how is that person going to function on his everyday life. And most of them are actually focusing on one component. I just showed you some of the components. So only on categorization, only on inhibition, only on memory. And this is a problem on our everyday life. We don't do any one component. It's more complicated and complex than that. So the accurate measurement of executive function will be to evaluate clients while they perform novel and complex activity that require planning, organization, adaptation, changing environment, and etc., etc. However, to do that, it's quite complicated. And clinicians and researchers are looking for assessments that will be no time consuming. Like if I would like to look at executive functions in the supermarket or in crossing the street or in driving, if I have to take the client out and do those things, it will take a lot of time. And also in the rehabilitation centers, they don't let people, clinicians do it because it's too expensive. So in order to engage people in IADL and EF, I would say that the solution, or one of the solutions, is to use functional virtual environments. And today, I'm going to present one functional virtual environment, the supermarket. So just to give a definition of virtual reality, there are, again, many definitions of virtual reality, but to do it shortly, so in virtual reality, we use advanced technologies to produce a simulated environment, and you can think about whatever is there in the everyday life that you can these days do in virtual reality. I would say that 20 years ago, virtual reality was something very expensive, and it was also something that we thought should be very complicated to exactly imitate what we do in everyday life. And today we know it's not really what we need. We don't need caves, we don't need helmets, we don't need all these complicated equipments in order to do virtual reality. We can do them on laptops, on in each clinic, and we can also take those virtual realities into the client home. And one of the projects that I'm going to show, that what we did it in people's home. So just to say that in virtual reality, of course, we use visual, audio, sometimes we use a haptic, and sometimes we use a smell. And another very important thing is that when you use virtual reality, you get very good outcome measures, which the computer gives you right away. In neuropsychological tests, what I presented before, we actually observe what the client is doing. We score, we do things like that. Here we don't have to do anything. The computer does it. And of course, this is why it's more objective. Okay, so my objectives for today are to describe the respective executive function performance profile of two samples of post-stroke clients, and to investigate the distinctive performance of acute and home-dwelling stroke client using the virtual supermarket platform. Okay, so here are demographics of two different groups. And I should say it's two different groups. It's not the same group that we evaluated as an acute and later on. And I'll speak about it later. So there are two things that have to be said here. The mean age of the acute CVA was significantly higher than the home-dwelling one. And the years of education was higher, significantly higher by those that were at home. And you can see that the rest are very similar. So our inclusion criteria for those two projects were having a mini mental state examination of higher than 24. And I take it that everybody knows that very simple cognitive tests that everybody uses. We used the clock drawing test, and we used another test. Both were to make sure that our clients have no unilateral spatial neglect. So here is the supermarket. It's as you can see, it's on the screen. It could be on a screen like that when we assess the clients, or it could be on a laptop or desktop computer. It was initially developed by Dr. Evelyn Klinger. She is an engineer, and it's time to say that we collaborate with engineers, with people in graphics, whatever. And she presented it in a conference, and I was attending there, and she said it's to look at planning. And when she ended her session, I went up to her. I said, you can see a lot more than just planning here. You can see the whole spectrum of executive functions. Of course, as an engineer, she didn't have that knowledge, and since then we started to work together. And okay, so just to say that in order to use it in Israel, we had to do some adaptations. I think you might see that there are some letters in Hebrew here. Maybe the letters. But the rest, we checked it, and we saw that it doesn't matter where the supermarket is. If it's in France or in the United States or in Israel, supermarkets are mostly the same. Okay. So the task for this project was to purchase 7 items. You can see them and that's how it looks exactly on the screen for the client. He has to purchase them. He proceeds to the cashier desk, and he needs to pay. He doesn't really pay, but he pays by, there is I'll show you. Right here, there is a wallet, and he just clicks on the wallet with the mouse, and that's how he pays. Yeah. He does have prices for each of those items, but he doesn't need to calculate, okay? It's not calculation yet. Okay. So as you can see, it's a first-person perspective. He navigates he has a cart, and he navigates the cart within the supermarket. It could be also with joysticks, but we don't use it too much. Okay, so in the assessment session, the user selects item by using the mouse, and the items appear in the shopping cart and disappear from the list. You see the list here? It's some of them disappear, so it's a kind of a cue that he gets while he's doing it. And the computer records the position, the time, and the action, and I'll elaborate on the outcome measures. Okay, so we have 2 sessions here. One is a training. It's very similar to the assessment itself, but those are different items. And he gets both verbal and notes on the screen to know exactly what he needs to do. He can do that. We have to make sure that he really knows what to do and how to do it, okay? So that session can take sometimes 5 minutes and sometimes 20 minutes. Then we go into the assessment, and the assessment, I can tell you, in average, it takes about 20 minutes, okay? Okay, so here is what we see at the end of the session. This is the trajectory the client had within the supermarket. The red dots are where he stopped to purchase something, okay? This is very good for me to see at the end exactly how he planned and how he went within the supermarket, but it's not only for me, it's sometimes for the client also. We can show him that when we finish up, and he can try and respond to how he went within the supermarket. Why? Why did you go twice on the same aisle? What happened? Etc., etc. And it's very good for treatment. Today I'm speaking about assessment, but it's very good for treatment. Okay, so here are 2 examples. One is a healthy control, and this one is a Parkinson, is a client with Parkinson, and I think, the picture speaks for itself. I don't have to explain how many times the person with a Parkinson went back and forth to find one item. Here you can see that, okay? And of course, we get also the scores themselves, the duration, the distance, and the stops, and I'm going to elaborate on that because we have more than that. Okay, so we have 8 outcome measures. One is the total cover of distance in the other one is, so as I said, it's time, it's meters within the supermarket, and it's the completion. How did he understand what he needed to do? Okay, so we have the number of correct items, number of incorrect, and the number of purchase that he did out of those 7 that he had to do. Okay, here are the results, and you can just look at it briefly because I'm going to elaborate on each of them. Okay, before that, just to say that because we had 2 results that had a significant difference in the demographics, what I showed before, we ran Mancova, and we found that there were significant differences between the 2 groups on the VAPS performance, and no effect for age and no effect for years of education. And this is very important when we look at the rest of the results. Okay, so the cover distance, we can see that the acute CVA clients walked significantly more within the supermarket than home dwelling. It also took them significantly more time to walk within the supermarket. Okay, the purchase, here we have a kind of a result that we really don't understand. The acute CVA purchased significantly more items than the home dwelling, but they made significantly more mistakes. That's okay. The acute CVA had significantly more stops, which took longer than for the home dwelling. And the reaction time of the acute CVA is significantly lower than of the home dwelling. Okay, I'm trying here to look at all the outcome measures in a different way, in more from the executive function point of view. I'm looking at from one side on their efficiency within the supermarket, and the other one is the task completion, which is actually how they understood what they had to do. And so you can see that in our case, in efficiency, the home dwelling were a lot better, right, than the acute ones, okay? And however, we had the number of purchase that the acute clients did better than, significantly better than those that were at home. And this is a result that we really don't understand. We are continuing to look at it and continuing to do another project to look at that. Okay, so looking at the conclusions, significant differences between stages of stroke. Home dwelling clients perform better than acute stroke in most variables. And the question is, of course, is it because of the rehabilitation process? Is it a remission, or because of the plasticity of the brain? Those questions have to be further studied to try and understand them. We did see the advantages of the VAPS outcome measures, which provide information about the process of performing a task, and not only the end results. Sometimes when we look at executive functions, we actually look only at the end result, and that doesn't help us to try and treat later on, try and find strategies how to treat. And virtual reality has important potential application for behavioral neuroscience. I must say that the clients really enjoy it. They ask again and again to do it, more than other rehabilitation strategies that we do in the clinic, that some of them are quite boring for the clients. And to tell you that this one, the project about the home dwelling clients was published in the Stroke and Cerebrovascular Disease in 2013. And the other one was published in Hebrew, so I didn't put it in here. But we never published them together, so thank you very much.
Thank you very much for a very interesting talk. I have a question, because you said there is no effect for age and no effect for education. How many was there in the groups? Because I will think a lot of elder population, which is the majority that get the stroke, a lot of them today are not that familiar with computers or have not been used it. So there might be a difference from the people that actually before the stroke were very used to in their work using computers and performing this task, compared to a person that actually hardly use computer. Okay, so I didn't really focus on that so much, but we did have a questionnaire focusing on their experience on computers, and we did see some variation on computer use, but we did not see any correlation between those that were very experienced. Also, when we speak about very experienced, it's mostly they use it for fun, for leisure. They don't use it on everyday basis like we use, okay, because those are older people, as you said. So although we did see differences in how much they use it, we didn't see correlation between
the results here and the use of computer, meaning that this is actually very easy task from a computer point of view, okay? And we make sure that they actually know how to use, it's only those keys that you use over here, okay? So we make sure that all of them know how to use it and have one intact hand to do that, okay? So I don't think that's the point here. There were 31 in the acute one and 23 in the home dwelling. Yeah.
Have you compared this Barthel score, this Barthel scoring of post-stroke with this VAPS?
Yeah.
Have you compared and correlated these two scoring system, post-score, that is Barthel post-score, and your this VAPS?
I don't understand. The motor? Yes, we did do a very short motor test to each of them, and we made sure that they can use the computer. It's not that we took a test for motor, okay, but to make sure that they can use the computer only for that. As I said before, if they had neglect, they were excluded from the research, okay? And then we did try it on something else just to see that they can use the hand to use those 4 keys on the that's the, yes.
Could I ask, I wondered about, in the case of acute stroke, potentially emotional aspects and maybe relating to, say, risk-taking. If they're carrying out more purchases and making more mistakes, for example, if that's, I'm not sure if you take account of those aspects or if you,
right.
You can, yeah.
Okay, it's a great question. We didn't look at their emotional state at all, if that's the question. We did not look at that. I have to say that that was part of a very large project in which we had about 9 other cognitive tests that we used it. It was out of the scope here, so I did not, but we did not look at their emotional state. Okay.
So I have another question. You have about recovery of patients. You have about motor recovery and behavior recovery.
Right.
So, and I propose to you to study the behavior of these patients in real mold, not near the computer. All these positions in real mold.
Okay, so we do also that. I especially wanted to present here the virtual reality. We have some projects in which we compared what they do on the computer and versus what they do in the real supermarket. Burgess and Chalice have a test. It's called the MET, the Multiple Errands Test. So we use that, and we compared between what they do in the virtual supermarket to what they do, and it's very, very similar. Okay? Okay? So, right. So it's a great, it's a great point. But the problem is that you can't really take each client into the supermarkets. It's very nice to do it in a research project where you have a lot of money that a grant gave you, but it's more problematic to do it in the rehabilitation center where clinicians don't have the time for that. And so our purposes is actually to show how close that virtual supermarket is to the everyday and it was very, very similar.
Oh,
Yeah.
thank you for such an interesting topic. My question is, normally in the clinic, there's always a dilemma of how do you know that they were not like this before the stroke? So have you tried to find any normative data for this study population?
Okay, so yes, we asked them before how much they go to the supermarket. I'm sorry. Do they go by themselves? Do they go with the wife? Or we had more men here, so I'm speaking about, do they go together with a wife? Do they go to a big supermarket? Do they go to a small 7-Eleven in the corner? Or do they go and so we have all that data, and we try to not to include those that said we never went to the supermarket before. Okay? So that, yes, we do, and in the paper we elaborate on that more and more. But yes, we did ask those questions. Okay?
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much.